Hello, grade 12s. Welcome back from the short break. Just before the break, we were just going over some objectives of the Competition Policy or Act. And we were talking about the Act being able to assist small businesses to participate in the economy. Then the last point that we're going to look at before we move on to organizations that ensure that there is competition in the market. Just before we go there, we're just going to wrap up this by looking at the last point. So to allow the previously disadvantaged to increase their ownership of business. Okay, we know that based on the apartheid system, that people were denied access in certain sectors of the economy. And when we look at the whole concept of redistribution, we have to look at people that did not have the opportunity, that previously did not have the opportunities or were previously disadvantaged by the apartheid system. So the Act is there to ensure that we increase ownership, of business in terms of people that were previously disadvantaged by the apartheid system that existed previously in South Africa. So it's a good thing when we look at redistribution, then we can tie it up to the Competition Act as well. Okay, so just to recap before we move on to our the businesses or the institutions that ensure that competition is maintained in the South African market. But let's just wrap up what the competition policy is all about so that we can tie it up with the institutions that we'll be looking at just now. So we've defined what competition is. We said it refers to the existence of free entry into and exit from the markets. This ensures that markets are not dominated by certain businesses, and we've looked at the monopoly system, and we said we're trying to prevent monopolies and other powerful businesses from abusing their power because they find themselves in the position where they are dominating the industry. We've also looked at the Competition Act in South Africa, and we said that the government introduced the Competition Act 89 of 1998 to promote competition in South Africa in order to achieve the following objectives, and that is to promote the efficiency of the economy. We did chat about that in more detail, and also to provide consumers with competitive pricing and a variety of products, and also to promote employment, which is very important, and to encourage South Africa to participate in world markets, in international markets, and also to accept foreign competition in South Africa. And we've seen that, particularly in the fast food industry. There's been so many fast food brands from the foreign market that have come into the South African market space. And it's been pleasing to see that, because that has shaken up the fast food industry a bit in terms of competition and the variety of products that are offered in that particular market. Also, it promotes or supports or enables for small businesses to participate in the economy, and then also allows the previously disadvantaged to increase their ownership of business as well. So now we're going to move on to the institutions that ensure that fair competition actually does take place in South Africa, and that if there are issues, they provide the correct channels that need to be followed in order to address these particular issues. So now we're focusing on institutions, starting off with the Competition Commission. It investigates the restrictive business practices. So here's an interesting word, so I'm going to underline that so that we can come back to it and just explore it a bit further. The abuse of dominant positions, also interesting, and measures, we did look at that earlier on, in order to achieve equity and efficiency in the South African economy. Okay, so we know that we said other businesses could put restrictive measures in place in order to block other firms from entering the market. And there's a number of ways that they do that because they want to dominate the market, and when they dominate the market, then they can play around with the pricing. They can influence the pricing because they dominate the market. And also we spoke about mergers because if you have a merger, that could result in you forming a powerful institution because you've combined one or two or three businesses in other cases in order to form one powerful company or institution. So this is also another challenge because you end up being in a dominant position, and therefore you can influence price because you are a big or a large corporation that could influence the decision making in that particular industry or in the product or service that you are offering. And there are issues of equity as well that needs to be considered, and efficiency. We spoke about that the Competition Act does promote efficiency in terms of the economy. So these are important concepts that the Competition Commission will be following and ensuring that they are being followed and that they actually do take place in the industry. And then we move on to the Competition Tribunal. It is a jurisdiction throughout the Republic. It is a tribunal of record and independent from any other competition institution. So it is an independent institution. It's also independent from other competition institutions. The tribunal's main functions are to grant exemptions, authorize or prohibit large mergers, adjudicate if any misconduct takes place, so it's also quite interesting, issue an order for costs on matters presented to it by the Competition Commission. So it is, if you do business studies, if we talk about the CCMA, they come and they listen to both sides, and then if they can make a decision, and they can say, well, you can take the issue further. But what's quite important to be aware of is that this institution is independent, from other competition institutions. So you might have gone to a competition institution first and you were not happy with the outcome that you got from there. And then your next step will be to come to the Competition Tribunal and try and have this matter sorted out or resolved. And we know that they can grant exemptions. So if you want to be exempted from a particular clause that's in a Competition Act or in the policy, you have to approach the Competition Tribunal for that if you want to be exempted on any particular matters. Also, they authorize and they prohibit large mergers if you want to form a merger and your intentions are good, and not just to dominate the market and influence pricing, but perhaps to improve on operations and also on the quality of the products that the firm is or they offering or are offering. So they would decide on that. They would decide whether that should be allowed, if the merger should go ahead, if they feel that you don't have the best best thoughts of the consumers, then they will decline and they will prohibit you from forming that large merger. And also, if there are issues of misconduct that have taken place, so they are the ones that are going to make a ruling on that, and they're also going to decide who incurs the costs on matters that are presented to the Competition Commission as well. So this is more of a legal structure that firms can approach if they are dealing with any issues of misconduct or they want to be exempted from a particular clause in the Competition Act, but also if they feel that they should be allowed to form a large merger because they have the interests of the consumers and households at heart, so they might be granted that permission or that could be authorized. But if they feel that, it's all for selfish reasons, they might prohibit them from forming that particular merger. And then moving on to our next institution. So we've got the Competition Appeal Court. We know that we work on a very good constitution in our country, that if you are not happy with a decision that was made, you've got another platform that you can approach in order to get an appeal on the decision or on the judgment that was passed. So its status is similar to the High Court, as you can see, because in terms of law, if you are not happy with the outcome or the judgment that was made by the court, you can approach the High Court for an appeal, and then they will make the final judgment on the actor, on the action or the act itself. So it has the jurisdiction throughout the Republic and is a court of record. Its main functions are to review orders made by the Competition Tribunal and amend or confirm these orders. Okay, so they could review the order that was made by the Competition Tribunal. They could amend it, they could make changes to it, or they could confirm it. So they could, turn around and say, we believe that was a fair decision, so we dismiss your appeal, and then judgment will remain. So this is the platform for that, that if a firm is not happy with the decision that was taken by the Competition Tribunal, then they've got another institution that they can approach in order to get the decision to be amended or to be confirmed. But this does act as a high court. It's very similar to a high court, where the final decision will be made. I suppose now they do take it up to the Constitutional Court as well, if they're not happy with the decision that it was made at the High Court. Okay, so that's an institution that has a legal structure that is very similar to a High Court, and it can amend and confirm orders that were made by the Competition Tribunal. Okay, so that's quite interesting. I think we've sort of like learned some interesting legal terms when it comes to competition, because if you are planning on starting your own business, you need to be aware of the competition policies that exist. Should you find yourself in a case where you are accused of misconduct in terms of competition and competitive pricing, so you will be able to approach any of these institutions in order to seek some judgment or protection, or if you want them to amend or perhaps exempt you from any clauses that are stated in the Competition Act of South Africa. Okay, so just to sum up today's lesson, so in this lesson, we covered the following concepts. So we've looked at competition. So competition was the main point or the main focus of this lesson, because we have to understand that competition is a good thing. It's not a bad thing, because it does give us a variety of products, because if we had just one firm supplying all the goods and services that we need, we will be very limited for choice. So it's good to have the choice because you can look at pricing, you can look at quality, you can look at style, and sometimes you can look at taste. Some products taste better than the others. So competition is encouraged. And also we encourage South Africa to go into the world market to compete with international firms, and also to allow international firms to come into the South African market space in order to compete with local businesses. Because if we get those businesses coming into a country, it does get our local businesses in a point where they decide, we need to shape up, or these guys are going to take over. And like I said earlier on, we have seen a lot of this happening in the fast food industry, and with all the big brands that are coming into our country, getting our consumers all excited about what they are offering. And therefore, local businesses find themselves in a position where they have to reinvent themselves and rebrand themselves so that they become more appealing to the locals. And therefore, competition plays an important role in also encouraging innovation in the world of business. So we learned that competition refers to the existence of free entry into and the exit from markets, and this ensures that markets are not dominated by certain businesses. So we said that companies could decide to form a merger where 2 or 3 companies join hands and they decide to become one large corporation. So with issues of dominating the industry, that could be a bad thing. So we don't want that because we end up with a system of having a monopoly where we have one company that dominates the industry and they actually influence the pricing as well. So we try and avoid that, and we encourage that there should be more companies allowed to come into the market space or businesses in order to ensure that competition is encouraged and that competitive pricing is offered to the consumers, because we don't want to buy from businesses that are selling above the market price. Because if you are selling above the market price, then you are going to chase your consumers away, because they will end up going to your competitors who are selling based on the market price. So it's important that we consider all these things when we are looking at competitive pricing. Well, that's a wrap from today's lesson. I've trusted you've enjoyed the lesson and you've learned so much from this lesson. From me, Uspiwe, it's a wrap, and goodbye.